I need your help. Like most camper companies, when you order a camper from Topo Toppers, there is sort of the base price for the camper shell, which includes the bed, the pop-up and everything. But that's just the shell. So anyways you want to customize the camper, you sort of pick those things out off of a menu, and each of those things adds an expense to the cost of the camper. Now when I had them put this together, I knew I wanted this cargo door. I knew I wanted these awning brackets so I could get a 270-degree awning up on the truck. And over on this side of the camper, I splurged on the Arctic Turn overland window, which opens up this way. It's got an integrated screen. It's got an integrated window shade. Really love this window. Now, one of the many things that appealed to me about the Topo Toppers camper was just how sleek and clean and low profile these are. It sits nice and low over the truck, very clean lines. It's about as aerodynamic of a camper as you could get. My previous setup, I had the big tall canopy, I had a bunch of stuff on the roof, and that was really impacting my gas mileage. This camper has made a surprising improvement in my gas mileage. And I was convinced that I would never want to put anything on this roof. Now, one of the options that, coming up? Okay. Now, one of the options that Topo offers is rails. They'll install rails on the roof of the camper so that you can integrate some sort of rack or other roof mounted things like solar panels. As I had already run the cost up with that cargo door and the Arctic Turn window and the awning mounts, and I was convinced I wouldn't want to put anything on that roof anyway. I wanted to keep it sleek. I decided not to have them install roof rails on top. And that was a mistake. And it wasn't even that expensive. I don't remember what the cost was to have them incorporate rails on the top, but ultimately I wish I just spent that little bit of additional money and just have them on here just in case. The issue here is my max tracks. I don't go any place without my max tracks. Since removing my roof rack, I have been just tossing the max tracks into the back seat, and they can transport there just fine as long as I don't have any passengers. But when they're wet and dirty, icy, muddy, snowy, whatever, that's not fun to bring all that crap inside the back. And I was convinced I did not need to mount my max tracks on the roof because I was convinced I was going to find a way to mount these right here. I wanted to have them handy, easy to get to, easy to take off, put back on when I'm using them repeatedly. I have these max tracks pins that previously I used to mount the max tracks onto my roof rack, and these are great. These are fantastic. You can mount 2 or 4 max tracks on them that you can put a padlock through. These work fantastically. I was thinking that I would put these somehow onto this cargo door, and then I would just carry my max tracks right here. The issue is these keyholes where the max track pins go through to capture the traction boards, where they fall on this cargo door makes it pretty much impossible for me to mount those pins. There is hardware and stuff right underneath there on both sides. The other issue is that even if I could get those pins mounted through there properly, if the max tracks are mounted in such a way that they don't actually run into the awning, then they cover the latches for opening and closing the cargo door. So as far as I can tell, mounting them on that cargo door in any way is just not going to happen. In fact, there's just simply no way to put them on the sides of the camper. I need the other side for that window to be able to see out of, be able to open and close it, and I got to be able to operate that cargo door. And yeah, I've looked over and over at the rear bumper. What could I do on the rear bumper to find a way to mount these on here? It can't go there. It keeps me from accessing my propane bottle as well as accessing the stuff that's in here. There's not room to mount them in there someplace. On the back of there, it's not really a good solid mounting spot. I would have to, I don't even know what I would do. Obviously the shovel would have to go away. But that's pretty awkward. Yeah, I did also think about going underneath, but then they just become sort of something that captures rain, snow, mud, whatever. I'm not fond of that idea. The only maybe kind of sorta would be to customize something here, build some sort of a bracket onto here that would allow them to, I mean, I would have to weld some arms up and down to get to where these pins were, or come up with another mounting solution. That would also require changing up the way I'm securing my jerry cans, which wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be doable, but it's going to be awkward, and I'm not even 100% sure what would happen. No, yeah, that would be fine. So welding up some sort of modification here to the bumper swing arm currently is maybe an option, although it's complicated and it seems like it would be awkward. I have also thought about using these anchor bolts for the factory roof rack that I removed for the camper to somehow create a basic simple rack up here that could carry the MaxTrax. Now the issues that this presents is none of these surfaces are flat or like even evenly curved. It's a sort of complex compound curves that wraps around. So building something that would mount onto these points and have it sit, you know, neatly on the roof of the truck, not impossible, but a challenge. It would also sort of impact my use of the sunroof, which when I had a roof rack on here before wasn't super useful, but now that I don't have a roof rack on here, I have been using the sunroof and it's nice. That rain is just not going to let up for me, is it? So basically that brings me back around to the roof of the camper, which seems to be probably the best solution. But that brings us back around to the mistake that I made, which was not having Topo Toppers install rails on there. So now, if I'm going to have rails up on top of the camper, it's on me to drill holes and get that sealed up. You see what I deal with from like October into May. It rains here, and I'm not fond of the idea of punching holes through that roof. I am basically ready to do it, but I'm not fond of the idea. I have the tube of Sikaflex already. I thought about just simply mounting these pins only right through the roof rather than putting any sort of rails up there and a more complicated rack. But I feel like if I'm going to drill holes in the roof of the camper, I should actually just go ahead and put some kind of rail up there and give myself future ability to mount other things up there. And in addition to just being concerned with putting holes in the roof here in Western Oregon, it's also just simply a question of accessibility that makes the roof not ideal. At the last couple of Overland Expos that I attended, I specifically made a point of looking at how people had their MaxTrax mounted on their vehicles, just looking for some other ideas. Nearly everything I saw, every way that people had mounted MaxTrax on to various racks on the roof, on the side, you know, wherever, they almost always incorporated these pins in some way. It was just how they were mounting the pins onto their vehicle. But what I didn't find was any sort of brilliant idea I haven't already thought of that could work for me here. I'm even willing to spend a little money on something that, you know, would work. I've looked at commercial options that are out there. The problem remains, where do I even mount one of those commercial options? When I was developing the kitchen here with my sort of table setup, one of the things I looked long and hard at, which I really, really liked, is the MaxTrax holder table thing. Andrew St. Pierre White has one on his rig. Brilliant solution. I thought it would be perfect to hold my MaxTrax and be my table right here at my kitchen. But the contours of this truck don't lend themselves to something like that. It works better on the side of a van or, you know, a Land Cruiser troopy sort of vehicle. The other problem is that having something right here actually blocks access to my fuel door. So I can't do that at all. Now, this side of the truck is pretty battered already. Maybe there's some way I could mount them here. I'm not exactly sure how, or if I would have to like hammer down this fender even more. You know, I haven't necessarily ruled that out. I'm just not quite sure how I would go about doing it. I don't have any qualms about drilling holes in this metal. I mean, this is already beat up anyway. It doesn't even matter. It'd be great to have the MaxTrax on the side of the vehicle somehow, so I wouldn't have to climb up to get them, climb up to put them away. Otherwise, I think I'm pretty close to just going ahead and coming up with some sort of rails to mount onto the roof of the camper so I can at least get the max tracks up there. It would give me the possibility of mounting a solar panel or something else up there at some point in the future if I wanted to. But here's where you come in. Over the years, I've received many excellent ideas and suggestions from viewers when I've been grappling with something, trying to figure something out. Despite looking at this for, gosh, close to a year now, looking online, looking at other people's rigs, I may have not necessarily seen everything. I don't always, think of every possibility. Your brain gets into these little boxes, and I try to think outside the box, but it happens over and over again that I've been looking at something, even trying to think of all these different possible ways to go about it, and then bam, someone will come along in the comments and say, why don't you do this? And I'm like, oh, duh. So, before I go and start drilling holes in the roof of my camper, any other ideas, any other suggestions? What would you do in my case? Would you just go ahead with drilling holes and mounting some kind of rails on the roof? What would be your approach if this was your rig and you needed to get those on there somehow? Well, that is it for this little midweek extra video. I just want to hear from you guys, see what you think. Post a comment below if you have any ideas, suggestions, if there's a product you've seen, or if there's an approach that I've talked about that you think is the best idea, or if there's an approach that I just haven't thought of. Comment below. Thank you for watching.